Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. My name is Jason Buffington with Veeam. I'm joined with two of my esteemed colleagues. We're doing something a little different this week. Dave Russell has the week off, and we have taken over the Veeam LinkedIn live stream to celebrate Veeam at Microsoft Ignite 2021. So joining me today are two of the Veeamers that are responsible for driving the overall relationship between Veeam and Microsoft. What I'd like to do for introductions for this one is all three of us have actually worked for, with, under, above, somewhere within that Microsoft ecosystem. Take 20 seconds, say who you are, how many years you were part of the Microsoft family, and what product lines did you touch. I'll start. I was with Microsoft for 6-ish years, mostly in System Center and Windows Server, Data Protection Manager, storage functionality, and a little bit of Operations Manager. David, how about you?
Great, thanks. So I was with Microsoft for 21 years, mostly on the field sales side. And then also really spent some time focusing on some of our storage solutions like Store Simple, Express Route, some others within the Black Belt organization.
Awesome. I'm Johan Huttenga, and I worked for Microsoft Support for a while, back when I was starting out. Since then, I've been at Veeam for a very long time as well.
Very long time. All right, so we have all lived and breathed and drank the Microsoft Kool-Aid for a while. So this is a week kind of feels like going home in some ways, just to kind of see how the technologies have certainly evolved since we were last there. And then now how Veeam adds value to those. As I said, this is a precursor to Microsoft Ignite, the online digital event for this week. If we could have our producer go ahead and bring up, Mark, this is some of the stuff that's going on this week that we want to encourage folks to go to. The URL in the lower left-hand corner, vee.am/MS Ignite 2021. That is Veeam's featured partner page. I think of it as a virtual booth. You can call it whatever you want. But from there, you can find out all the resources and what's going on. But we have 3 big activities going on for the week. Certainly one of them is 6 ways to accelerate your journey to the cloud. We're going to talk about some of those today in a little bit of detail. Secondly, we're going to, on March 2nd, this is going to be kind of fun. We have a quiz show. And you should win swag and win fun prizes and impress your friends with your knowledge. So that'll be fun at 2 o'clock Pacific time, Tuesday tomorrow. And then later on that Tuesday at 5 o'clock Pacific, we're going to be talking about Azure Backup and Recovery. By the way, if you have not registered yet for Microsoft Ignite, go to that MS Ignite link on the lower left-hand corner. You can win a chance at some fun prizes as well. And anything else related to the overall Veeam Microsoft relationship, that's the URL on the right-hand corner, vee.am/MS Cloud. Okay, so far we've given you that big picture view. What I'm going to ask is, David, while you're tell us about the Microsoft relationship, and while we do, for the folks at home, please tell us where you're from. Tell us what Microsoft products that you natively touch along the way. Let's find out who's out there this morning. But first, David, talk about the relationship, where it's been, where it's going, what's exciting to you.
Yeah, so thanks for that. I mean, the relationship we have with Microsoft is really it's been kind of the bread and butter for Veeam as we began the company. But really, over the past few years, it's continued to accelerate as Veeam has found continued alignment with Microsoft as customers embrace cloud solutions. And so what really we've been working on is how we do a better job of integrating our solutions with Azure. And that's been a really important component for us. So there is the areas where we certainly work with the field sellers on how we co-sell solutions and helping customers find that how to protect those workloads and direct those back into Azure. But really, it's also looking forward and how we find places of integration with new solutions. We just had a launch last week of some new solutions that came into market. So what I love is that it is building on the greatness that we've had in the past and continue to move forward and finding better ways to drive solutions together for our customers.
No, that's a great fit. So when I was at Microsoft, one of the things that I had a data protection manager and also the little built-in NT backup utility that came in early versions of Windows along the way. And one thing I used to say, even when I was there, was it was never Microsoft's intention to be the industry leader in backup, right? Their goal was to have some level of foundational data protection so that you would run those core platforms and then partner with that ISV ecosystem of folks that really understand things like backup, other things like security, management, et cetera, along the way. And one of the things I'm so excited about is, David, as you talked about every one of those evolutions that Microsoft has had, especially in Azure, we're right there, right? Every time that they release something new, we're there to back it up. Because you should not be rolling out new platforms that are not protectable. Otherwise, they're not really a mainstream production kind of thing. So before we get into a couple of those technology elements, let's go ahead and take a look at the map. So we always want to find out where folks are from. I always love it when Canada joins at the beginning of the hour because so much of the world turns green. I love that. Thank you. All right, so what do we got? So along with our Canadian friends to the north, we also have Washington. David, I'm assuming that's you and maybe your mom watching how your session's going this morning.
Right.
Johan, you're out in California, right? So
Right.
The West Coast is well represented this morning. I am from the great state of Texas. In the center of our screen, our producer is from Georgia. Mark, as always, thank you. Tennessee and New York, very good. So that covers the new world. Let's go back to the old world a little bit. So we got France in the house. Of course, Christian is our social media maven czar extraordinaire is also in the house as well. And I got to give a pause out for this. This is Christian's actually last live stream with us. And so every time that you talk about the map, every time that you have found these LinkedIns and these other social media posts around the way, every time that you've discovered these sets of offerings, that is the handiwork and brilliance of our friend Christian. So we wish him nothing but the best moving forward. So and then I didn't get to mention it because I was too long-winded, but we also saw Saudi Arabia was in the house. I think I saw India. Also there as well. So please keep the countries coming from that. All right. So Johan, you're the smartest of the three of us on this call. He says it relates to the technologies and how the pieces and parts work. So let's talk about that a little bit. There's kind of four solution categories that Microsoft has offerings in market, and we have value adds for each one of those. I think it's slide 2 on our setup for today. Johan, could you just kind of at a high level talk through each of the four offerings that Microsoft has and where we fit a little bit?
Right. So with the people working from home, as much as we are now, M365 has become a huge part of our lives. So Microsoft 365, we have a tool that helps you manage the legal aspect and compliance aspect as well as backup of that, and make sure that you can keep your data following governance rules that you might have had, for your email, even if it was on premises before. Then there's Azure native virtual machines and a bunch of IaaS, so infrastructure as a service related stuff in Azure. We have Veeam backup for Azure, which is a native offering in the marketplace you can deploy to protect those. We also have support for AKS, so Azure Kubernetes Service. It's one of the more popular Kubernetes offerings out there. And we have Kasten by Veeam, which is a cool way to do app mobility for containers. And then we have the traditional virtual and physical environments, your on-prem stuff where it all started back in the day. And we have Veeam backup and replication for that. We also have support for Azure Stack HCI, which is the new thing. Azure Stack HCI OS ties in your Hyper-V and S2D storage spaces direct into Azure, and we support that as well.
Man, David, when Johan said, back in the day, he made it sound like, back when you made servers out of stone tablets, Hyper-V was there and so was Veeam. But let's be clear, though, the data center isn't going away, right?
No, and Jason, what I would say is that's the beauty of this, right? I think what Johan talked about is people are going to realize that, hey, I've got some of this in my environment and I'm heading into this new environment. How do I kind of protect this hybrid enterprise, right? And that's where the story fits really, really good together, is that we've got these solutions that that protect what people have been and built their business on fundamentally in the past, but also helps them evolve into the future. And that's what's so exciting about these solutions.
Totally agree. Recognizing the fact that in no case is someone going to say, or almost no case is someone going to say, hey, I'm going to turn off the old. They may be scaling down the old. They may not be spinning up any new, 2U pizza box style servers in those racks. But the data center is still there. And I love the fact that as data moves from one platform to another, that we have something no matter where it goes from that. Johan, you mentioned the Kubernetes thing, and I know that you recently just did some new demos and architecture for that. Kubernetes is probably a little different than almost anything else here, just from a design perspective. Can you comment on that a little bit more, and then we'll kind of look at the more traditional architectures?
Sure. So making it easy to deploy a massively scale out cloud native applications always been a big deal, and Google, came out with something that was Borg internally, then became Kubernetes. Now that people are using it, they're actually using it for more stateful data than we thought initially. And stateful data usually needs backup. This means you might have an application database that deploys as part of your containerized deployment, or you have a bunch of metadata, and you have probably, we find a lot of people deploy a cluster per application. So it's a bit weird. You have a lot of different clusters out there, maybe different versions of Kubernetes, different applications, cloud native stacks, if you will, out there. And you need to find a way to maybe make it possible to migrate data between them, still protect the data that's inside if you don't have persistent storage underneath. There's those kinds of problems. And Kasten makes it really easy. You can deploy this as a cloud native application. So you just do Helm deploy Kasten, and you can use it as if it was another Kubernetes service, which it is, and use it to protect your setup there. It integrates back into Veeam backup and replication as well to some degree, and there's more coming there in the future as well.
Very cool. Okay, so I got to go back to my comfort zone because I can barely spell Kubernetes, kind of, sort of. I come from a data center centric world, and I know there's a lot of still data center centric stuff that's out there. So let's talk about perhaps the easiest way to embrace the future of Microsoft ecosystems and architecture, and that is Azure. And for most organizations, when you first start playing with Azure, one of the first things you think about is storage. We made an announcement or one of the new features in Veeam Backup Replication version 11 is some new capabilities around leveraging Azure Storage. Johan, what does it do? And David, why is it cool?
Sure. So it makes it easier to keep your data for longer periods of time. Traditionally, people might have used tape or other cheap and deep storage solutions. Now, if your data is already on Azure Blob, it's a pretty affordable, very resilient place to store your data. And there's just the ability to tier it down to that cheaper tier, which is archive tier. So in Veeam Backup and Replication version 11, which came out on the 24th last month, we have the ability to take those individual chunks that you write to capacity tier. Those backup files get chunked, turned into little blobs on capacity tier, and turn them into bigger chunks on archive tier, making it easier to keep that kind of cost optimization going because retrieval fees are higher for that, and allow you to keep data for a very long time.
The cool part is simple, right? It's cheaper, right? But it really does help streamline the efficiency of how do I take it today where something's more accessible and put it to that archive tier and really meet the customer's needs, right? Which says, hey, I've got retention policies that require me to keep this for a longer period of time, but yet I'd like to do that in the most economical way possible. And that's really what archive tier does here.
I have to admit, I was surprised how easy this was. So Johan, as you mentioned, VBR version 11 came out on the 24th. I spent a good chunk of Friday morning. I upgraded all my servers and my agents, and I think it took me about 15 minutes, maybe a little less, to get archive tier running in a new sober set, and all of a sudden I had 2 tiers of Azure Storage running across the way. It truly was that easy. One of the things that we often talk about with organizations is as you are looking at even minor things to optimize your data protection strategy, you don't have to start over from scratch. If you want to do one thing better today than you were doing yesterday, get your data out of the building, right? If the only thing you're doing is predominantly just storing your data on-prem, get your data out of the building. And with Veeam, that is as simple as, you set up an Azure account, and as I said, 10, 15 minutes later, I'm running both a cold tier and an archive tier within Azure. It was truly a no-brainer. All right, so that's the easiest way. That gets your data out of the building, but there's more to it than that. Especially in COVID, and Johan, I think you mentioned this as well, we have figured out that online collaboration tools has to be the most important lifeblood of most organizations. And for most organizations, that means Office 365 or Microsoft 365 along the way. We recently shipped version 5 of that. Again, same question to the two of you. What to do? Why is it cool?
All right. So with version 5, we really support enhanced support for Microsoft Teams. And one of the biggest growth areas on the Microsoft ecosystem side is Teams. And this means that there's a lot more chat messages as well as wiki pages and all these other things that you can do in Teams that need protecting. And we had already some support of that in the previous product, but now we have the Veeam Explorer for Microsoft Teams, making it possible to do granular recovery for that data as well. So that, I think the biggest part of that is that release. And of course, you can send the data to Azure Blob afterwards. So again, it makes sense.
Yeah, and look, if I were to tie into it, what's the coolest part is, the explosion in Teams has been incredible, right? Because of the environment we're in. And so I think what you get now is, look, it's protecting, but it's really the recoverability. And so I think that Explorer that Johan talked about, we're protecting one thing, but how quickly and easily can I bring stuff back? And that's what this new version allows us to do, is provide that granularity, really to get the user up and running and get that piece of information they might need. So that's a thing that continues to make it efficient and fantastic.
David, I couldn't agree with you more. My favorite part of the Microsoft 365 story is if you used to back up all your Exchange on-prem and your SharePoint on-prem and your files on-prem, you had Explorers for that. So we give an Exchange admin a tool that's natively talking about mailboxes and folders and messages, right? We give a SQL admin the ability to, databases and tables, Oracle, and we got a long list of Explorers. But I love the fact that as users are moved from Exchange on-prem to Exchange online, SharePoint on-prem to SharePoint online, OneDrive for Business, Teams, in each case, we provide an Explorer that lets that administrator who understands that app better than anybody else in the org understand how to recover that, regardless of whether the original source data was on-prem last month, in the cloud next month, or vice versa. So super proud of that. Now, I mentioned SQL, and actually this one that we don't have a slide for, but we do actually, Johan, we did actually add some new features for SQL as well in version 11. If you could touch to that, and then we'll just keep on going through the Azure ecosystem. But Sure. This one's for all the DBAs in the house.
Right. So we've always been able to do, well, I say always, eventually we invented this feature, but instant VM recovery, where you can boot something and have it come up almost instantaneously. So the database administrators out there wanted to do the same with backup files of just their database to go to a specific point in time. So in version 11, we make it possible to take your database backup with Veeam, pick with a slider your specific point in time you want to restore to, and instantly mount that to your SQL setup if you want, and boot. Well, in this case, not boot, because we're not doing anything but starting the database. That's all.
Yeah, one of the things that Veeam has pioneered along the way has been this concept of instant VM or instant recovery. The idea that you should not have to restore your data before you can start to recover your business processes. And the fact that we store that data in such a way to bring that up means we have a level of agility that 10 years later, people still can't match. All right, before we spend more time on the solution stuff, we still want to find out where folks are coming from. Let's go back and visit the map again and see. All right, the world is green today. Mark, I don't know if you can hear us, but this might be some of the most green that we've had for a while. What do we got? So we got Indiana, I think, in North America, and yep. Wow, most of South America. Russia's in the house. Spain is in the house. UK, Brazil, Pakistan. We are all over the place today. This is fantastic. Almost all of LATAM. Argentina, Brazil, Venezuela. That's fantastic. Thank you for Pakistan. Wow. All right. I think we have Mark. I don't know if this is right or not, but I think we actually have more green than non-green, and that's the first time we've seen that in a while, which probably makes it. This is also the first week that Dave Russell hasn't been on.
Are you saying I should be invited back? Is that it?
I don't know. I mean, one Dave might be as good as another. I mean, we've got good exposure this week. We should think through the causality of that. All right. So we've covered two of the solutions. By the way, every one of these we have more content on than we'll be talking about at Microsoft Ignite. All of them again. If we go back to that first slide in our deck, all these solutions have highlights and solution areas. Always make sure you can go to VEE.am/MS Cloud in that lower right-hand corner to learn more about these. Let's look at a few more of the technologies that are out there. So we've covered the on-prem traditional stuff, get your data out of the building. We've covered Office 365, the epitome of leveraging a Microsoft cloud. For a lot of organizations, one of the newest things that they're doing to modernize their infrastructure is instead of standing up that one more physical server or standing up just a few more virtual machines on-prem, whether it be Windows within a VMware environment, whether it's hosted on Hyper-V, Nutanix, wherever it comes from. Instead, how about we leverage Azure as a hosting environment instead? One of the most important things that we often tell customers, though, is as you go into production in a hosted environment, do not sacrifice protection. Do not sacrifice retention of data. And for that, version 2 of Veeam Backup for Microsoft Azure is imminent. Can we say imminent?
I think it's released at this point.
On release? Is it released? I got so excited about VBR, I lost track of VBA. Same question as always. What to do? Why is it cool?
Right. So we added new features around app consistency in version 2 and make it possible to go from hot and cool tiers within a storage account. So make it a little more flexible when it comes to storage settings. But Veeam Backup for Microsoft Azure is a marketplace deployed appliance, and you can use it to back up your Azure native virtual machines. But it ties back into Veeam Backup and Replication, so you can see a lot of your job statuses there. You can control a lot of the settings there, and you have the ability to import and restore back from Veeam Backup and Replication as well. So Veeam Backup and Replication lets you restore using Direct Restore to Azure, a workload that you backed up from any of those on-premises workloads, so your Nutanix, your vSphere, your Hyper-V, into Azure. And you can also now use it to do the reverse if you wanted to. But the big thing is you get continuity of protection all the way through.
Yeah, and so I'm going to chime in here and again look at this from the customer, and what we've seen is that customers need that agility. And sometimes to spin up these things up in Azure and develop those things in Azure is the right approach for them to drive the agility they need in the business to respond to customers' needs in this changing world we've got going on. And so this is what I love, right? This is, again, part of that hybrid model. If this makes sense for the organization to build something up in Azure, then we have the ability to help them protect that. But then even beautifully, bringing it back to you can actually centrally manage this. That's the part that is so phenomenal here, is that you've got to be able to have a holistic view of your environment. And this is, with Veeam's tools, it allows you to actually do that. So that's what I find is a great part of this solution.
Yeah, when I first heard about what we were doing from an Azure hosting perspective and that we were leveraging the snapshotting functionality first and then taking it back to our own premise, I remember back many years ago when data center customers on-prem were saying, oh, I'll just snapshot. I don't need backups anymore. Go tell anybody who's running a storage farm on-prem, you don't need backups, just use snapshots. And you can just hear the dollar signs, ding, 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 ding. Snapshots is not a replacement for backup, right? So snapshot is a great way to do a rapid quiesce, a rapid recovery. But if you're going to do retention, that's still where backup is truly what we ought to be doing. And so I love the fact that we're leveraging that best of breed technology in-prem and then pulling that back. There's another nuance, though, to the Veeam Backup Azure story that I think is so powerful, and that's how it combines with our native Veeam Backup and Replication story to allow a level of hybridity. Can I use that as a word? Agility, fluidity. It's not about just can I move it up. It's also maybe can I bring it back as well. Let's go to our last slide. And Johan, can we talk about the cloud mobility capabilities or let's just call it the portability of workloads from one platform and back again?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I touched on this a little bit, but I didn't cover off the physical workload aspect of it as well. So you can take a Veeam agent-based backup of a physical workload as well for Linux and Windows and do the same thing. You can do this with Nutanix AHV or vSphere, but you can take any of those workloads And you can put those on a Veeam repository, for example. That repository could be extended into Azure. So that could be an Azure capacity tier-based repository or have archive tier in it. Now, because it's already in Azure, restoring from that data will be really fast. And so you'll have an Azure native virtual machine. But the reverse of that is true as well. So Azure has a huge hybrid play. We're talking about Azure Stack, Hub, Edge, HCI. And there are things there that you can do protection with Veeam as well. So you can actually take the workloads that you had and do a direct restore, not to Azure necessarily if you don't want to, but restore to Azure Stack Hub, or do a restore from anything, which is another version 11 feature, from any workload as an instant recovery to Hyper-V. Guess what? Azure Stack HCI is Hyper-V. So you can instantly recover your physical machine to Hyper-V. I've tried it. It takes a minute or two to boot. And then, of course, with instant recovery, the trick is that once you're done and you're happy and it's running, then you migrate the data afterwards, which means you're not wasting time for that to happen.
Fantastic. In my mind, that's the epitome of that hybrid story, right? David, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I was going to add something there. I think, there's two components to this, right? You've got the can you do it, right? Which I think Johan just explained technology-wise. But then you also have to have really the licensing vehicles to allow customers to have that flexibility. I don't want to get the details of licensing, but I think that's the great thing here too. That Veeam has looked at both sides of this and said, how do I make sure what technically we can do it, but how do we also make this easy for the customer that there's no additional tax, right? When you want to move things around, we give you a license that allows you to move things where you want them to be based upon the needs of the business. And I think that combination allows that flexibility and the alignment of what customers need today in the business.
Fantastic. In my mind, nothing says hybrid more than the fluidity of moving those workloads back and forth. We actually, Dave Russell and I covered some data a couple weeks ago where we looked at 40% of workloads that are spun up in the cloud last year were just born in the cloud. They needed a new server. They spun it up in Azure hosting as opposed to on-prem. The other 60% were migrated. But it was interesting to see that 1 in 4 organizations actually first started a workload in a cloud and then brought it on-prem when it was ready for production. Right. Another set used the cloud hosting for forensics. They spun up a secondary copy in Azure so they could actually do forensics and testing and DevOps. And then they parsed it over when it was done again. So there's lots of reasons why workloads should move back and forth. I love the fact that Veeam is actually the thing that makes that work along the way. All right. So we are coming close to the end of the hour. I'll give each of you 30 seconds to give a last thought on Veeam, Microsoft, Ignite, whatever you want to say. Johan, you first.
Sure. So our featured partner page on the Ignite platform has a bunch of new videos on V11 and V2 of Veeam Backup for Azure. There's also a video on Kasten and some things about how we work together with Microsoft on these new features. So there's a lot of stuff that we do behind the scenes to make this happen. I think that's kind of what the big takeaway is, that we don't just do this as Veeam, we do this with the help of our customers and of partners like Microsoft as well.
All right, my take is, look, I think I'm excited about Ignite. With the launches that we just had last week, it's a great opportunity for people to learn more of what we have in market today that they can take advantage of. I think it's also great to see that we continue to evolve here at Veeam, right? We're looking at and continue to improve these solutions and continue to make it a better experience for customers. So, it's a great time for people to learn, to see what's out there, take advantage of this, and engage with us on how we can help drive solutions together.
Okay. We are coming at the top of the hour, but I do want to give a shout out to Dominican Republic, to Slovakia, to the Netherlands, Denmark, and Oregon. There's a lot of a few last minute joiners. As the segment winds down, please feel free to keep piling on with where you're from. We'd love to track down that. We will reply to the comments that are in the thread. Let's bring up the Microsoft page one last time. Please visit our on-demand session. My breakout session is already on demand. We've got Tuesday 2 major events: the game show, you will win swag. And then in the afternoon, an Ask the Expert session on Azure Backup. And then make sure to tune in to LinkedIn on Friday, where Rick, Melissa, and Kirsten will be talking about Veeam 1. And we're talking about the monitoring solutions. We don't just protect. We don't just orchestrate. We don't just recover and move and migrate and all those other wonderful things. We also monitor. And so the Veeam 1 product, 3 of our strategy cohorts will be walking through that. As always, thanks for watching. Johan, David, thanks for joining me today. It's going to be a busy week for Veeam and Microsoft Ignite. We'll see you online. Thanks,
Great.
everyone.
Thank you so much.